Can you hear me? Doing good? Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Testing. One.
Unmute. Testing.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's Ellen.
Hi, Ellen. Can you hear us?
I can.
Oh, great.
Yeah. We've turned.
As people are coming in, they're able to unmute themselves. So if they want to say, let us know that they have sound or check in, that's great. We'll
Okay.
ask everybody to mute themselves at the right before we start.
I see where it says you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it.
Oh. Okay, we'll make sure that that gets enabled.
Yeah. So Claudia.
Yes.
Are there any actual votable items today? Or is it all informational?
They are informational
Okay.
on the
Right.
agenda.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And since we have one public comment, we're just listening, right? We're not responding, correct?
Correct. And
Okay.
they're limited to 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Video is now on.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-mm.
There you are. Now I can see you.
There you go.
Okay.
Are you still muted, Elizabeth? I don't know why. I don't know. That wouldn't make any. You should be able to, as a panelist, when we did the earlier run-throughs, we could mute and unmute. Once she enabled it, we could mute and unmute ourselves. She could always
Right.
mute all.
Okay, I just received a message, unmute now.
Okay.
And so you can go under participants and unmute, right?
Right. Right.
Mhm.
So if you are joining us, if we would ask you if you want to unmute yourself to request to be unmuted.
Mhm.
Go. Oh, so if I do this mute, it doesn't work. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we have to be really quiet. Okay. As you're joining us, commission members, you are able to mute and unmute yourself. So if you want to test your sound before we get started, that's fine. And then we'd ask that you mute yourself until called upon so we don't have the background noise during the meeting.
I'm testing. Can anybody hear me?
I am able to.
Yes.
We hear you. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning, Member Katula. I saw Member Roberts raise their thumb, but I don't know if she spoke.
That was just I heard everybody and thank you.
Great, thank you.
That way we don't have to mute and unmute too many times.
Hola, this is Enrique. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
This is a test. This is Andrew. Can you hear me?
Hey. Let's see. Where it is.
Whenever the chair calls it. Whenever the chair calls it, we're ready to start.
Okay. Does she know that?
Yeah.
Good morning. This is Gwen Sanders checking in.
Morning.
Yes. Oh, great.
Good morning, Ms. Sanders.
Morning, morning, morning.
We're ready to start, Madam Chair, whenever you are.
Okay, I am ready. All right, let's call this meeting to order at 10:01. And let's proceed with roll call. Welcome, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll start with Interim Vice Chair Warsan Arton,
Here.
Member Kate Chasen, one of our new appointees.
Here.
Norma Chavez Peterson. She indicated she would be absent. Kate Clark.
Here.
Kara Desert, sorry.
Problem, it's desert here.
Angela Elliott Santos. Rashid Essa.
Here.
Did I hear here? I think I did.
Yes, here.
Yes.
Thank you. Great. Eleanor Evans. Ryan Garcia.
Present.
Bill Gore. Shane Harris. Taha Hassan. He did indicate he'd be absent. Austin Jones. Vince Catula.
Present.
Enrique Morones.
Present.
Nicole Murray Ramirez. He did indicate that he may be delayed about a half hour. Our chair, Ellen Nash. Angel Ortiz.
Present.
Gina Roberts.
Present, ma'am.
Gwen Sanders,
Present.
Summer Steffen. I just saw her chat, she was present.
Yeah.
Kenya Taylor,
Present.
Samuel Troy, and Dafine Watson.
Present.
Let me go back, but I believe Angela Elliott Santos is present. Could you call out? Have you unmuted yourself? We'll check back in about, and I believe Bill Gore is also present if he's able to announce.
Okay.
And let's go back, Shane Harris, Austin Jones,
Shane Harris indicated on the chat that he's on.
and let's see, Samuel Troy. Okay, that concludes the roll call.
All right. Do we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum.
Yay. Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. We have the honor of having some residents and citizens of San Diego for public comment. So if they are available and ready to go, we're here to listen.
Madam Chair, we have Yusuf Miller, who is calling in with his public comment. If we can unmute him and have him speak. Speakers will have 2 minutes on non-agenda matters.
Good morning. My name is Yusuf Miller, and I'm with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition. And I'm just here to make a quick comment that hopefully that North County will not be forgotten in this coalition commission, which we're used to that happening. All the focus is being in San Diego, and I want to make sure that there's equity throughout the counties, and North County included. So thank you very much.
And that concludes our public speakers, Madam Chair.
Oh, okay, great.
We
Great.
did receive 2 comments that were distributed to members. They did not want to speak. They just wanted their comments sent to the members.
Oh, okay, great. All right. I wanted to cover a little bit about the overview of the running of the meetings. I wanted to, more importantly, just reiterate that it's important that all voices are heard.
Madam Chair?
Excuse me?
Madam Chair, this is Shane Harris, Commission member.
Yes.
I wanted to ask if we can have a conversation placed on the next agenda for the next meeting in regard to the public comments that we have received for a discussion on expansion of the Human Relations Commission and organizations and institutions that should be added to this commission as member organizations.
Okay.
Making sure all communities are represented. If we can add a conversation on that at the next agenda.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So in regards to the organizing of the agenda, or I would like to ensure that I would like to, and we should all have the same sentiment, share the same sentiment that first of all, if we need to be here on time. We're only allotting 2 hours. And right now, since we're just gearing up and running, we have a whole lot of important issues that are on the table. So we are in the midst of a impactful time and challenge. One of the biggest items, in fact, you can see that's on the agenda today, is the budget. So it's going to be important that we are here on time. And it's also important that all voices are heard. Given the fact that we're new to this, we're trying to make it time certain, but then we don't want anyone's voice not to be heard. So at this point, we're still coming up to speed. So I would remind everyone, review the agenda, review the items that are on the agenda that's provided to you in advance. Do your research so that we all come prepared to respond and move the agenda as quickly as possible, but at the same time, having everyone's voice heard at the table. So I just wanted to reiterate the importance of that, and the code of conduct is, you know, let's let everyone's voice be heard, not interruptions, but allow people to speak freely. And I will be very responsive to ensuring that all voices are heard. So if I cut you off because you go too long, please don't take it personal, but it's my intent to ensure that everyone's voice is heard. Our last meeting, we had a robust meeting around introductions of all the fabulous talent and experience and expertise we have on this commission. We went in almost the entire time because, again, we can't see each other in person, and we're all new to each other. It was important that we just hear your voices and some of the stories and the experiences that you all bring to the table. And there were a few commission members that were not able to speak, and I wanted to ensure that their experience and voices are heard. I'm going to limit it to 3 minutes, and then the staff, of course, that's supporting our work, also is going to share with you. So commissioners who were not able to introduce yourself, I'm going to limit it to 3 minutes, but if you could just share something about yourself, particularly your community work, your community experience, what your passion is about, a bit of personal information, and anything else you want to share about in terms of demographics. Take it away.
I can start. Can you all hear me? Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Watson. I'm the interim vice chair. Yeah, first I want to say, I'm sorry I missed your introductions last week. I had one of my teeth was bothering me, so I had to like make an emergency appointment to get it removed. Unfortunately, it overlapped with this meeting, so I want to apologize for that. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Watson. So talk a little bit about, I guess, my community experience. I grew up in Lemon Grove, California. Specifically, even though I grew up in Lemon Grove, which doesn't necessarily have a large Somali community, I think the Somali immigrant community is the community that I'm most familiar with, that I grew up in and I'm from. What I do, I'm a youth organizer right now. I work with young people from high school, college, anything in between, those in the workforce. So I've been doing that for about the past 1.5 years or so. I am very passionate about youth voice and including young people in our decision making, in our and making sure that input from young people is valued and like listened to. I think also currently our commission, I'm one of the youngest people, if I'm not wrong, here, and I would love to see people who are younger than me on here. Preferably maybe like at least one person under the age of 18. Yeah, so like few things I mentioned about youth voice, youth justice, housing. Also a little bit, I guess, about myself. I went to San Diego State University. I went to Hills High School before then. I was always, I guess, the only Muslim person in a lot of my classes, a lot of the institutes that I was in. When I was in AAS, I was the only Muslim person in there. Like a majority of the time, if not all the time, I'm always the only Muslim woman in the space that I'm in. So when I went to SDSU, I realized there was a lack of diversity in voices in our student government. So I served in the student government for about 3 years. So that's a lot where a lot of my, I guess, political experience comes from. I'm gonna just go back. So before I came to Lemon Grove, I grew up, I came from Kenya. So I came here in 2006. So I officially lived here for about 14 years. Also, that also means that I came here, I didn't speak English. after I learned English, I also was the translator a lot of times for my parents and family members. So I have that experience, which I think also why I'm very passionate about like community input and community involvement. Because if we don't hear from the communities that are a lot of times excluded, whether that's language barriers, economic barriers, whatever it might be, that are excluded from spaces, then, you know, like, are we doing what we're supposed to do? We're not including those voices and those communities. Yeah, so that's a little bit about myself. I don't want to keep it too long. There's a question about like my passions. I thought about that question, and to be honest, because I think one of the things that like the Human Relations Commission that we're supposed to address is inequities, discrimination, like, you know, racial inequity, and so on and so forth. And that's a question I thought about a lot, because somebody who grew up Muslim and also like obviously Muslims that wear hair scarf, right? I don't think the most harmful thing, it is harmful, but the most harmful thing I don't think is hearing like, you know, people call you like names, whether that be like, you know, go back to where you came from, terrorists, etc., whatever it might be. I don't think that's the most harmful thing that can happen to minority groups. I think the most harmful thing that happens to minority groups is systemic inequities that are like kind of weaved into the system that cause the most harm. For example, if we talk about San Diego County, the impact of redlining that were never reversed, that to this day, if you look at low-income communities, a lot of those communities are communities that were historically redlined. If you look, and not only are they low income, right, but also those communities, a lot of times are communities that are undercounted in the census or hard to count communities. I think a lot of these are issues that are interconnected. A lot of those communities are also communities that are over-policed and over-criminalized. So for example, if you talk about the impact of like gang injection and gang enhancement charges on our youth, those are a lot of times that happens in like low-income communities, especially communities like Black and brown communities. I guess to me, the most harmful things that can happen to low-income communities, we want to talk about like, you know, equity, is systemic inequities and the harm of like systemic policies that were either passed in the past and that were never like corrected and reversed, or like, you know, like nothing was taken. I guess they were like, for example, red line obviously not allowed, but like it was never eliminated. Like there was nothing ever done to kind of counteract the harm that it caused. Again, I feel like I'm talking way too much, but I just wanted to point that out. So it's important that we talk about, you know, like discrimination and things that are happening, but I also want to remind everyone that I think the most harmful thing that can be done is like systemic racism and systemic inequities. Yeah, and then the last thing I'm going to share before I hand it off is this question about fan facts. My name Warsan is two Somali words put together. So War means news and San means good. So my name is Good News. Nice to meet you all. Sorry I missed your introductions last week. And whoever's next, I'm gonna hand it to you.
I think our member Austin Jones was not able to introduce himself last week if he is present. He did not respond during roll call. So we could go to our newest member, Kate Chasen, if I'm saying that right.
Yes, I don't know if anyone can see me. Well, that's a really tough act to follow in terms of introductions, so I'm just kind of going to go by what's on the screen. So for examples of community work, I do a lot of work with the Anti-Defamation League, especially with No Place for Hate. So I am the president of my school's No Place for Hate committee and one of the founding members of it. And then I also do work with the DEA to do drug awareness and prevention in the community and on my school campus. For experience in the community, we do lots of local town halls about local issues. So things like youth drug use and things like that. And then we also do parent to student forums at my high school. I'm a high school student. We do parent to student forums, kind of exposing issues about communication between the parents and their students about social life or drug use or things like that. And then we also do drug use work with the local middle schools, just to kind of bring awareness to things like that. I'm really passionate about social justice work and the righting the wrongs and things like that. So for some personal information about myself, I'm a 16-year-old. I'm going to be a junior at Sarah High School this year. And for demographic information, our high school has a very diverse racial population as well as lots of differing living styles. So Tirasana is somewhat of an affluent community, but we also have a lot of our students that come in, that bus in from City Heights. And we also have a huge military population on our school campus. So it's a very good exposure to a lot of different demographics and just a lot of different living situations as well as social situations for different people on our campus. And for a fun fact about myself, I've played the cello for 7 years.
And then our last member was Norma Chavez Peterson, but she's not able to join us this morning. So then we could go to our staff members for brief introductions of themselves. We can start with Denise Alvarez Negrete, who works a lot behind the scenes at these meetings.
Good morning, everybody. I am behind the scenes, so I guess I should try to put my video on so you guys can see. Let's see here. All right. Hi. Hello.
Yeah, I get to see your face.
Hi. So thank you, everyone. Good morning. So my name is Denise Alvarez Negrete, and I am a first-generation Mexican-American, youngest of 7 children. I'm a native of San Diego. I grew up in South Bay, Chula Vista high school graduate, and I went to San Diego State. I got my degree in international business. Single mom of a 2-year-old little girl, and she's a little handful and very confident, and I'm very proud to be her mother. I joined the county family in 2013, and I worked as a human services specialist in the South Bay FRC. And then I moved and transitioned over to Child Welfare Services, and I was working in the administrative office. I later worked in behavioral health for the San Diego Psychiatric Hospital under the hospital administrator, and it's been such a wonderful experience working in all these departments. And I am just honored to be part of this group, to be part of Human Relations Commission and provide all my support that I can. And I do have employee resource group membership. So I'm part of the San Diego Latino Association. I'm also part of the Asian Pacific Alliance for County Employees. I have done some volunteer work in the past for Mana of San Diego. And when I have some free time, I like to do community event volunteering, such as dancing at Pride for the San Diego Pride Festival. I took my daughter with me when she was very young, and I was dancing on stage. And so my brother is openly gay, and I was there to support my brother and my family, and my mom was with us, and my daughter got to be a part of it. So it meant a lot to me. I've also done volunteer events at the She Fest and Jacob Center. And just my passion is being an advocate for people that don't have a voice. My passion is also traveling and dancing, music. So again, I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, and it's been an honor to be part of this commission, and I hope to continue to provide the support to help our commission succeed. So thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Denise. Natalia Bravo.
I'm Natalia Bravo. I have been with the county for almost 9 years. I began working in human resources and later the community services group, and I'm currently the CAO project manager. I really feel so fortunate to have the opportunity to serve as a staff member to your commission. I was raised in a bilingual, bicultural household in southern Mexico by journalists and social activists. And I've had experiences living on both sides of the border up and down the Southwest. And prior to joining the county, I worked for the Mexican government, and as a teacher and a trainer in Texas, as well as a translator and grant writer for a number of social and environmental justice NGOs. So I have an understanding and a profound appreciation for how crucial it is to have community members represented at the decision-making table, and really am looking forward to working as a staff member supporting your commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now Elizabeth Bustos.
Good morning, members. Again, I'm Elizabeth Bustos, Community Development Liaison for the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency. My professional background is in public health and public policy, and really community engagement with an equity lens. Back in the day, it was when we called it justice, and we still call it justice now. Here at HHSA, I lead the COVID-19 community and faith-based organization, public education and engagement campaign. And it's all about COVID-19 preparedness, monitoring, and collaboration. I just coming up this November, I'm celebrating my 2nd year anniversary with the HHSA Executive Office. Before coming here, I was a director of community engagement for UCSD's Be There San Diego, and project director for the Southeastern San Diego, I should say, Cardiac Disparities Project, and our focus, equity and justice by addressing the social and structural determinants of health. And then prior to that, I was with San Ysidro Health Center, where I was the director of community relations. And as many of you know, San Ysidro Health Center is one of the largest federally qualified health centers in the United States. I'm a native San Diegan, I'd like to say, with a twist. I have deep cross-border roots. You will probably, if you hang out with me long enough, you'll figure out very quickly that English is my 2nd language. Grew up in Tijuana, came here to San Diego to finish my education. I claim the communities of Golden Hill and Southeastern San Diego as my home, as long as they claim me. Very privileged for that. And when I'm not here championing health equity, my greatest joy is giving back to my parents and now being their caregivers. My father just celebrated his 90th anniversary, and my mom is not too far behind at 89, and come from a long history of social justice warriors, journalists, and professional photographers. It's a privilege to serve you. What I know is going to be absolutely transformational work for our community. So thank you so much for offering your treasure to us. I will do the same for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm Claudia Silva. I'm the director of the Office of Ethics and Compliance, and came into that position January of 2019. And we're responsible for the county's ethics and compliance programs, including various types of investigations into certain matters. Prior to that, I practiced law. I've been a lawyer for over 25 years. I practiced law at the county for a few years as the assistant county counsel, and then I was in National City prior to that for about 11 years and was the city attorney for that city. And prior to that, I was at the city of San Diego as a deputy city attorney doing municipal law all those prior years. I grew up in Los Angeles, moved around a bit, but predominantly throughout the San Fernando Valley, and I'm first generation Latina. My family immigrated from Chile many, many moons ago. And then I moved to San Diego for law school and have lived in Chula Vista since 1997. And I am really thrilled to be on as staff support for this commission. I find this commission is invigorated and ready to tackle the issues that they have been given. And I really looked forward to providing the support as you promote positive relations. It is my privilege to serve, and I look forward to continue doing so. With that, I'll turn it to Garrett Stanton.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I appreciate being able to speak to everyone in front of the commission, and for all of you to dedicate your time to be able to make this happen and for me to support everyone. I've been with the county in different extents for 3 years. This last year, I have been serving as a management fellow with the Office of Ethics and Compliance with Claudia as the director. I've done my undergraduate and postgraduate in San Diego State University, and I am originally from San Jose. I've been living in San Diego for the past 7 years, and I'm a member of the LGBTQIA ERG, And like I said in the beginning, I'm so thrilled and thankful to be able to serve at a professional role for this commission. And I'm looking forward to seeing all the great things that you all will do. Thank you.
With that, Andrew Strong.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Strong. I'm our Chief Administrative Officer's Chief of Staff. I actually grew up in Shreveport, Bossier City, Louisiana. I joined the Navy when I was 18 years old and spent 9 years as a hospital corpsman in the Navy. And I got out in 2007, and then I joined the county in 2008. I started as a non-paid student worker here at the county. Been here for 12 years. I'm honored to be our CAO's Chief of Staff now. I've been in this capacity for 4 years, and before all that, I've worked in several different capacities throughout the county. Started off in HR, Human Resources, worked in the Land Use Environment Group, and also worked in our Finance and General Government Group Executive Office. You know, I'm also executive sponsor for our African American Association of County Employees. And outside of work, I am a proud BAPAC member, although I think I do need to pay my dues, Ellen, so I'll get right on that. I'm also a RISE Fellow, Generation 3, and I'm also a Growth and Management Oversight Commissioner for the city of Chula Vista, where I live with my wife and my 2 children. My son is 19 and goes to Southwestern College, and my daughter is 12 and goes to Enrique S. Camarena Elementary School out in Chula Vista. I'm really excited about this commission. I'm excited to see what the Human Relations Commission and the Office of Race and Social Justice is going to bring change to this region. I'm really excited about that. And I have a passion for inclusive leadership. I have a passion for inclusive government and making sure that there's representation at all levels of government. So I'm really excited to see that change happen within our county. And other than that, that's a little bit about me.
Rachel Witt.
Can you hear me now? Better? Good morning. Sorry about that. My name is Rachel Witt. I am the Chief Deputy County Counsel in the Office of County Counsel, and I've been working there for the last 14 years. Our office is here to provide legal support to the commission. And I've worked for the county for 14 years and have been a lawyer since 1997. Prior to working for the county, I did work at the San Diego City Attorney's Office and the St. Paul City Attorney's Office in Minnesota, which is where I was raised. I was born in South Korea, but I grew up in Minnesota, where I went to law school, and moved to San Diego when I was, well, I guess in 1999. So I've been here in San Diego for a while. I just wanted to thank all of you for your volunteer service. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I'm excited to be a part of it, and look forward to be able to support you in that role. So thank you very much.
Great. Are those all of our introductions, Claudia?
Yes, it is. We're ready for the next item.
All right, we're ready for the next item, our county budget summary by Ebony Shelton. Ebony, take it away.
By way of introduction, Ebony Shelton is our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer and our Chief Financial Officer, presenting our budget item this morning. Staff is honored and happy to have her do this presentation for the commission.
Can I ask a question? So do you want us to hold our questions till after the presentation, or is this going to be interactive?
Were you able to hear her? Okay. I think we have a sound issue. She asked if she'd like to get through the slides.
Okay.
And if we could save the questions for the end.
Okay.
We're making sure her mute is unmuted.
Okay. How much time have we allotted for the budget? I forgot, was it 45 minutes to an hour?
About that.
Okay, let's go.
No, you need to unmute yourself on the. No, we still don't hear you.
How about now?
Yes.
There you go.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Thanks for this time to be with you all. Looking forward to sharing with you all an overview of the county's budget. And since everyone shared a little bit about themselves, I'll share a little bit about myself as well. I'm a native San Diegan, proud to be so. My family's been here for many, many years. I often joke and say that, you know, I have so many cousins here in San Diego that some of you are probably my cousins, and if not, you definitely know them. So, today I have about 20 slides to walk you all through. I am going to spend about 25 minutes really first starting off with just hopefully a brief overview of the budget process, and then we'll dive into the actual budget itself. So if we can go to slide 2, that's actually the summary of what we're going to be discussing today. So just a little bit more about the role here. As Claudia mentioned, I'm the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer as well as the Chief Financial Officer. I've been in this particular role for about a whopping 30 days or so. But before serving this role, I was actually the Budget Director for the county for the last 10 years. I've been with the county for over 20 years. So my job really is involved with, you know, facilitating decision-making associated with the budget, which we also refer to as the operational plan. So today, like I said, I'm going to focus the majority of our discussion walking you through the budget process and the budget cycle, including the different ways and methods that are used to solicit feedback on the budget during each phase of the budget process. Next slide, please. So first, I'll start by saying that most of that family that I have here in San Diego, they all think that I work for the city. And it's not a surprise that they think that because it's not always clear which services are provided by which arm of government. So I'll start by talking about what the core services are that the county provides. The county provides services to the entire region, as well as additional services to unincorporated communities, which can be grouped into 3 basic categories. First are the services that we administer on behalf of the state. These are functions that the state is ultimately responsible for, such as social services and health and human services programs, but where they've directed the execution of that service delivery to the county. The next set of services are services that the county is responsible for providing to the entire region, such as operating detention facilities, prosecuting crime, administering elections, assessing and collecting property taxes, and ensuring environmental health. And finally, the county is responsible for providing municipal services to the unincorporated communities, similar to services that are provided by cities to incorporated areas such as law enforcement and land use. So with that as background, let's talk about the budget process. And now I'm going to the next slide, slide 4. So this is what we're going to get into next here is the actual process and cycles for developing the operational plan. So starting on slide 5, this is a visual depiction that we use to talk about the planning environment. And while the budget is adopted just one time a year, the planning cycle is a continuous planning cycle. It's directly linked and embedded to the strategic plan, which is the overall vision and mission for the organization, which then translates into a 5-year long-term financial plan. The environment, the planning environment, as you can imagine, is very dynamic. All of these activities that you see here on this slide are activities that are constantly influencing the environment, as well as discussions and decision-making to help us detect early signs of opportunities or challenges or risks that may impact the budget. And these are all inputs that are considered consistently. And I'll emphasize that there's not a need to wait until the budget document is on the street to provide input to county department heads and executives about budget priorities. The door is always open for that dialogue. And department heads do listen to and seriously consider feedback and input from the public in regards to priorities. But these are all the various inputs that we have to take into consideration. Next slide, please. So the budget document itself is the policy document that operationalizes the county's response to those environmental factors and puts the strategic plan into action, including implementing priorities of the board. It communicates not only where the resources are going to be applied, but also what the county has done to meet current goals and objectives and what the focus areas will be in the coming year. Next slide. So the guidelines and the framework that we use to craft the budget and to facilitate decision-making on budget, they're all set forth in the law, and they're what we refer to as the County Budget Act. These are actual provisions of the California Government Code that set forth the procedures and requirements on how we move about with developing the budget, including guidelines for revisions to the budget, the process for hearings and noticing requirements, as well as amendments to the budget and vote requirements. The California law, the Government Code or County Budget Act, it requires that the counties have a balanced budget, which means for every dollar that we recommend to spend, that we've identified a funding source to cover that cost. And the county's budget is built on the understanding that the budget is just a plan, and throughout the year, that plan will require modifications. So let's talk about how we manage the budget through the different phases of the budget. And I'm moving on to the next slide now. So I'll start by saying the budget timeline is designed to allow for review and input before the Board of Supervisors takes action to adopt the budget. The budget was released on Monday, July 20th. And it's been on the street with the opportunity for the public to review and to provide comments on the budget online, and will be available for feedback until the final day of public hearings, scheduled to conclude on August the 19th. In addition to submitting feedback online, we had our first public hearings yesterday morning. The video of that is available online, and we'll have another public hearing scheduled for tomorrow evening so that the public provide feedback on the budget as well. Now prior to adopting the budget, the CAO may file a change letter to make revisions to the budget. These adjustments that we make are typically to reflect information that becomes available after the development of the recommended budget. So for example, there may be changes that occur as a result of the governor's revised budget. And I'll say that by design, revisions are filed at the end of the public hearing period in order to allow for consideration of all public testimony as well that's been received from the public in the context of prior to adoption. So recommendations that ultimately get made to revise the budget that's on the street right now will be available online by Friday, August the 21st. The board is scheduled to deliberate and take action to adopt the budget on August the 25th at 2 p.m. And that will be available to view online as well. Again, the budget is a breathing, living plan, and amendments are placed on the board's agenda throughout the year through either standalone action through the Board of Supervisors or through the CAO's quarterly budget status report, which goes to the board on a quarterly basis. Next slide. In preparing the budget, there are key policies that set forth the framework and decision-making process that inform the budget as well. These policies range from management practices, management of debt, and management of the county's reserves. I'm not planning to go through each of these policies with you all today, but I wanted to provide them all to you for your reference. Each of these policies is available and accessible online. And with that all as background, now we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the 2021 recommended budget. Next slide, please. Next slide. So our operating environment, I want to talk a little bit about that. And I mean, it's just we all see what's happening in the world around us. We are coming forward here with a $6.4 billion budget in an environment that's unprecedented, that continues to evolve actively. As a regional leader, it's not lost upon us that the public is looking to the county to respond through each of these budget issues through budget policy, or social issues through budget policy.
She went mute.
Sorry about that, gang. Let me get back here. So as I was saying, you know, the environment that we're in, you know, certainly is a challenging environment, and there are a lot of expectations that are being placed on the county as a regional leader to respond to these social issues through public policy enacted directly through the budget. So before we get into the numbers, which I'm going to talk about in the next few slides, we wanted to just share some of what the budget does in response to this environment. The budget includes resources to continue efforts to lead the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in fact, that's a significant driver behind the increase in this year's budget. It addresses what we know in terms of economic risk and current economic conditions, while also ensuring that we maintain essential services by drawing down on reserves and making adjustments to other areas in terms of service delivery so that we can begin to prepare for the necessary cuts that will need to be made going forward. And the budget also includes funding to address initiatives going forward, including additional resources for the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board to expand the authority and responsibilities that were authorized by the board, expansion of mobile crisis response teams, as well as to establish our new Office of Equity and Racial Justice and to add more resources to the Public Defender's Office. These are some of the modifications that will be included in the CAO's change letter that will be available online next Friday. So those are important things to highlight. The budget, you know, continues to maintain essential levels of public safety and also reflects the policy decisions that were made by our sheriff and DA to respond to calls for reform, including a focus on de-escalation and bias trainings. That's the kind of 50,000-foot overview, and now we're going to get into the detail of some of the numbers on the next slide. Well, first, before we go there, actually, we're going to talk about the strategy because that's also a really important part of this. So in light of our environment, you know, we had to have a really specific strategy on, you know, how we were going to go about building this budget. And in fact, you know, back in March when the pandemic hit, we were actually already done building the budget. We were just, you know, putting all finishing touches on it, getting prepared to release it to the public. But the budget had to literally be rebuilt from scratch in light of our changing environment. And this meant that programs that were slated for growth were ultimately scaled back, and we had to reevaluate the necessity of various projects like our capital program, for example. We knew that we were going to have significant revenue issues to address as a result of the impact to sales tax-based revenues and other revenues like interest earnings that would have otherwise been used to cover expenditure growth. So in building this budget, the core approach that we used, which was intentional and deliberate, was that there would be no new programs or expansion of existing programs, that there would be no additional staffing, and that there would only be exceptions made for items that were previously approved by the board or actions that were needed to address the emergency response. And again, we were really also focused on, not adding more economic stress to the region within all of that. So in order to solve the budget gap, ultimately, county departments, brought to the table a multitude of strategies to ensure that we could maintain essential services and programs. And again, we used general fund balances, which are commonly referred to as reserves, But also departments leveraged other one-time resources that they had available both within and outside of the general fund. And where it made sense to do so without impacting essential services, departments made recommendations for service reductions, and that's happened across every county business group with the exception of the Health and Human Services Agency. So next, we're going to go through and actually talk about some of the numbers, and I'll give you some optics on that. Starting with the next slide, total appropriations by group and agency. So as I mentioned, the recommended budget for 2021 is balanced, and it totals $6.4 billion in total. This is an increase of $159 million or 2.5% from our previous budget for 1920. And so what you see here in this chart is each of the county business groups' share of the budget. So what we see basically is that about a third is public safety, another third is in health and human services, with the remaining spread across the organization. The majority of the budget increase here that we see, the $159 million, is being driven by resources to support our existing negotiated salary and benefit increases across the group, as well as in the health and human services resources specifically to support the COVID-19 testing, tracing, and treatment strategy, as well as resources for behavioral health services, capital improvements, telehealth resources, and resources to address unincorporated homelessness. All of the business groups here are seeing a reduction in the budget with the exception of the Health and Human Services Agency, and that's consistent with the budget strategy that we discussed. The other group that is increasing is the Finance and General Government group, but this is primarily due to one-time resources that have been included for major upgrades of key human resources and financial information technology systems. So moving on to the next slide, another way that we talk about the budget is based on staffing. It's just another view that helps us to tell the story behind what's happening with the overall budget. So those same areas that we saw the budget decreasing, we also are seeing staffing levels decrease as well. County-wide staffing levels are decreasing by 95 vacant positions from the current year, with the majority of that decrease, or 100 FTEs, being in the public safety group. Specifically in public safety, we see 30 FTEs being reduced in the Sheriff's Department, and this is primarily due to the discontinuance of a food services agreement that they had in place with probation. But it's offset by some increases in the Sheriff's Department as well for deputies for homeless assistance, or what we call the HEART program, as well as for security services at the psych hospital. And in the probation department, there are 70 FTEs, all vacant, which are being reduced primarily in response to economic conditions. These are positions that where the department has decided it would be best to reduce non-essential community oversight of adults and juveniles who are not under supervision of probation, as well as to discontinue less effective supervision practices, and to make some reductions in administrative staff. In the land use and environment group, there are staff recommended to increase by 9 FTEs, and this is primarily to support the implementation of Assembly Bill 423, which will require the Air Pollution Control District to become a separate entity. And in the Finance and General Government group, we actually are seeing a reduction in FTEs, although the budget is increasing for those one-time IT projects. Staffing is reduced due to a reduction that we made in response to economic conditions, and this is across the board in support activities. Again, in all of these changes, there are no layoffs or demotions that are being recommended within these staffing changes. So now I'm going to talk about funding sources. I'm going to go to the next slide. And when we talk about funding sources, before I actually get into the numbers, I'd like to give everyone kind of a 50,000 foot view or definition of funding sources. And so I'm going to talk to you guys about this and translate our official technical terms into plain speak. So in the budget document, when you look at the different categories of funding sources that we have that support our revenues, there are three primary categories. The first category is what we call program revenue, which I like to call other people's money. This is mostly money that we receive from the state and the feds, and they tell us how to spend it, meaning that we can't just spend it on some other specified activity that we would prefer to do. We have to use it the way that the state is, or the feds, or whomever it is it's providing to us, requires us to do. The next category of revenue is general purpose revenue. This is the only source of revenue that the board has complete decision-making authority over how to spend. This is the revenue stream that has the most competition in terms of resource allocation. And this is the funding source that we use to support our ongoing activities to ensure that the budget remains balanced. And that's a distinction that I'll make from the next and final category, which is resources that represent one-time or non-recurring revenues that generally can only support one-time or non-operating activities, because simply put, the money will run out. It's not money that can be used to sustain activities over a long-term period. So next, we're going to talk about budget by the different categories of revenue that we actually have supporting it. So with this understanding of the major sources, I'll move on to the next slide. In terms of revenue, focusing on the right-hand side of this chart, our most significant funding sources that we receive are really concentrated in three areas, and that's state revenue in the teal, federal revenue, kind of a bluish shade here, and then what we call other intergovernmental revenues. And those make up about 45% of the funding for the county. And these revenue changes are where we're seeing the most significant changes to funding this year, which isn't necessarily a surprise. We knew that this was going to be coming as a result of economic conditions. We're seeing state revenues overall going down by about $80 million, and that's primarily due to decreases that we saw in Proposition 172 Special Revenue Fund, which is a special sales tax that supports regional law enforcement services, but also in health realignment revenue and in public safety realignment revenue, which is based on a projected decline in statewide sales tax receipts. So as there's less activity of consumers, it impacts our sales tax receipts. Another place that's being impacted by declines in sales tax receipts are in gas tax receipts that we receive for our highway users tax account, which supports our public roads. Now, in contrast to state revenues, we're actually seeing our federal revenues increase. And overall, federal revenues are going up in this budget by just under $170 million. And that's primarily due to the inclusion of the coronavirus aid federal relief funds, which are being used to support the T3 strategy, as well as funds to address homelessness and social service programs. I'm going to be talking about property tax revenues a little bit more on the next slide. But before I do, I want to focus your attention to the bottom left dark orange portion of this chart. And it's what we refer to as fund balance components and uses of fund balance is kind of a technical term there. But what this really represents are $370 million of one-time resources that are being used in the budget in total. This includes amounts that are within the general fund, as well as amounts that are outside of the general fund. And what I'll highlight for you all here in this $370 million, the county is using $150.4 million of its unassigned fund balance, or what's often referred to as reserves, to fill budget gaps, as well as to support other one-time operational needs. And we're going to talk more about what this all means in the context of the county's reserve policy and what we need to do in terms of replenishing that in the next few slides. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit more about property tax revenues. Next slide, please. So The general fund, you heard me mention in the last slide, the general fund is distinct and separate. It's the county's primary operating fund. It's being influenced by all the same revenue drivers that we talked about on the previous slide. But the general fund is a component of the county's total $6.4 billion budget. You'll note here on the left side of this chart that the general fund itself is $4.9 billion. So it's the largest fund of the county's budget, but separately distinct. And again, that is the county's primary operating fund. So we focus on it significantly. The general fund, supports it's supported, excuse me, by all of those revenue streams that we talked about previously: program revenues, general purpose revenues, and one-time resources. And general purpose revenues, as you can see here, represent approximately 29% of the general fund's financing sources. There's a little bit more information on general purpose revenue on the right side of this chart in terms of the composition of it. This revenue comes primarily from property tax revenues, but also from other property tax revenues, such as property tax revenue in lieu of vehicle licensing fees. We have the TEETR program, which is a program that's established to provide property taxes on behalf of the cities, and we collect their penalties and interest on their behalf. We also have some sales and use tax that come into general purpose revenue, among others. This general purpose revenue, as I mentioned previously, it's the funding source that can be used for any legal purpose, for any legal expenditure of the county. And therefore, again, this is the funding source that the board typically has the greatest flexibility in allocating this revenue. In fiscal year 2021, we have just $1.4 billion budgeted. This is just a very modest increase, actually less than 1%, or an increase of $11 million, very, very moderate. This modest increase is happening mostly due to some changes that we're seeing in property taxes being collected from former redevelopment areas. But we're, like I said earlier, expecting that revenues will be lower due to decreases in interest earnings as a result of what's happening here in our environment, as well as other decreased revenues such as sales tax revenues. So those are some things that are impacting general purpose revenues at this point, as well as an assumption about what may happen in terms of property tax delinquencies going forward, as homeowners are struggling in this environment. I'm going to talk a little bit more on the next slide, if we can move on to describe just where the allocation of general purpose revenues are. So here we see a large amount of general purpose revenues allocated to public safety. And that is a reflection of the local responsibility of the county versus the state. And to put that into contrast, the Health and Human Services Agency, they act primarily as an agent of the state. And so they get the majority of their funding from state and federal revenue. So earlier when we looked at the breakdown of the budget, we saw that public safety was about 1/3 of the budget, as was Health and Human Services. They both represent about the same in terms of size. But here you can see that public safety gets an allocation of general purpose revenue, more of an allocation, and that is because public safety is a local county responsibility, whereas the majority of services in HHSA are responsibilities of the state, or they're receiving revenues from the feds. So that's by design, in terms of local responsibility versus state responsibility, how the funding model is effectively impacted. So with that as kind of the backdrop on the budget, I'm going to talk a little bit about the county's financial position, because it's also an area that gets discussed frequently. So the next slide, and I'm on slide 19 now, is the county's annual financial report. And the county's annual financial report, this is specifically a snapshot of our balance sheet, if you will, and it shows the financial condition at the end of each fiscal year. And this particular, we don't have the financial reports just yet for fiscal year 1920. I'll start by saying that, which is why I'm sharing some dated information with you here. But what I want to do here with this slide is to just give you some information to kind of start the education process on what these balances represent. So this slide, it's looking at the 2019 results as well as the 2018 results, which were the most recent results that we have available. And when we talk about resources that are available or fund balances, they're required to be accounted for to describe availability of funds in descending order. Starting with the first line items, non-spendable. This is kind of self-explanatory. It's balances that you can't spend. Sorry about that. These are amounts that can't readily be spent. This is inventory or other receivables that are outstanding. So it's a balance that's not available, if you will. And then the next category is restricted. These are balances that are constrained by law, such as federal pass-through loans for housing programs or public safety realignment. It includes amounts that are restricted by laws that were passed by the voters for pension-related costs. So when we look at restricted balances, there are restrictions, if you will, that are placed on how these funds can be used. The next category are committed funds. These are funds that have been previously obligated by the Board of Supervisors for various purposes, including amounts for capital projects and social service programs. And then finally, moving on to the next two categories, assigned balances include amounts that have been budgeted for one-time expenses in the budget, in the current year budget, for multi-year contracts and funds that were set aside for redevelopment. And this leaves the category that we focus on as our available category, which is referred to as unassigned balances. These are the balances that are relied upon for economic uncertainty and for mitigating risk. And in 1819, this amount was $712 million, as noted here in blue. The county administrative code requires that the county maintain a minimum general fund reserve that's equal to 2 months of operating expenses. And we'll note that over the last 2 years, the general fund requirement itself has increased, and it's due to growing county expenses. So it's a requirement to have 2 months of operating expenses. So as expenses grow, that minimum balance grows as well. And for the last 2 years, we've ended the year with amounts above the minimum to the tune of about $65 million. But for 1920, we're not expecting that we will be above the minimum level. In fact, we're expecting that we'll be below the minimum level due to current economic conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to walk you through what we think is going to happen. And I have to say that the books are still closing and processing, so these are just illustrative amounts. We won't know what the final amounts are until the financial statements are completed later here in the fall. So moving on to slide 20, this is where we talk about what those figures might look like. And I want to walk you through this to explain how these estimates are projected. So starting with our balance that we had at the end of 2019, we ended with $712 million, and that's the same figure that was on the previous slide. And throughout the year, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the budget is a living document. There are amendments that happen to it throughout the year, and there have been amendments to the budget, including uses of fund balances to the tune of about $74 million. With all of that, department operations are anticipated to generate fund balance results to the tune of $123.8 million. And then another number that may be familiar, I know I've given you a lot of numbers today, is that we are planning in this 2021 budget to use $150 million to help us balance the budget. And so when we end and close the books this year, once the financial statements are published, our rough estimates are that we will end with about $611 million. Now, based on where we think expenses are going to end this year, when we calculate that 2-month minimum expense requirement, we're estimating that our minimum balance this year is going to be $707 million. So clearly, we won't meet that balance if we're expecting to end with 611. So we think we'll be out of balance by about $95 million. And under the worst case scenario, because the budget itself is we have a 2-year planning document. So in planning for the second year, we built in $135 million of using this resource to help us balance the budget. But if we do have to use that amount under the worst case scenario, we'll certainly be looking to, what our new normal looks like as we move through the economic conditions and hopefully some recovery here soon. Under those two, but if things stayed as is, we'd be looking at drawing about $231 million below our minimum. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a requirement in the county's administrative code to maintain a balance to that minimum. And we would have to replenish it over a 3-year period, which is required by ordinance. And so we have a plan in place right now to do that over the next 3 years. And that plan is here at the bottom of the slide. And the idea is that we would use general purpose revenue growth, which we believe will be available to replenish those balances so that we have them available to deal with other risks that we know we have out there and on the horizon. But this means that if we do use those funds that way to replenish this target, that those funds wouldn't be used or be available for anything else. So we'll definitely be looking at other strategies to try to minimize to ensure that we maintain as much financial flexibility as we can going forward. And I think with that, as I mentioned, that's the worst case scenario. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions. And I'll start by saying that I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. I'm really interested in the dialogue from this group. And we'll just jump right into it.
Madam Chair, you are muted. We can't hear you.
All right. We want to, of course, take questions and have a rigorous discussion. However, we also have the RFP also on the agenda item. So I want to go right into questions and discussion on the budget.
Madam Chair, if they can raise hands on their screens, we'll call on folks. And for attendees who phoned in, if they hit *9 on their telephone, we'll be able to see their raised hand for the commission members.
Okay.
Our first hand up is Member Morones. Enrique Morones.
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me. Ms. Shelton, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I have 2 questions. One, in the COVID disparities as far as the money that's spent on communities of color especially, this is something that's been addressed now for several months by many organizations, individuals, et cetera. So in order to find out more about the inequities in that and how the budgeting will be more equitable, for example, spending the money where the communities are, who would we talk to? Who would we talk to there at the county? That's one question. And then the second question is in regards, and this was sent by a member of the community that asked me to bring this up, and I even sent her request in. And it's in reference to the hotel rooms that are being rented for $200 a night. And it's for the people that have been affected by COVID, in which I think they rented like 2,000 hotel rooms. Yet the overwhelming majority of those hotel rooms are not being used. So are those being paid for by the taxpayers, even though they're not being used? And she wanted to know, her name is Adi. She's been very active on this issue, and she hasn't got a response from the county. She wants to know who she can talk to that will respond. Who's paying for those rooms? And if they're not being used, are they still being paid for by the taxpayers? So those are my two questions.
In regard to Mr. Morone's question about Ari's question, my understanding is a response is being sent to her today, I believe, in regards to the question she had outstanding.
If I can just add that, in regards to COVID spending, that we do have a very robust finance team that is responsible for monitoring and tracking of COVID dollars. There are updates given at every board meeting, but if there are specific questions that you don't have being addressed through those board meetings, we are happy to get those questions sent over to our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center Finance Chief, to make sure that those questions can be addressed for you.
Thank you. Would you do that through you or through Claudia, or who would we do that through?
You'll probably want to send them through Claudia, and we can coordinate to determine who would be the best to respond to you.
Feel free to, yes, feel free to send those to me, and we'll route them to the appropriate person.
Thank
Our
you.
next speaker with our hand up was member Kenya Taylor.
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for your dynamic presentation. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and have a background in integrated behavioral health as well as a certification in primary care behavioral health, extensively working in our rural communities where I live in the unincorporated part of town. And we used to do a lot of prevention and early intervention out in District 2. And we're trying to cut money. Has there been discussions to increase integrated behavioral health along with public safety to reduce costs? Because prevention and early intervention, it works. We were the county program of the year in 2015, but it seems like since we're in this unprecedented time, it can be effective, but also cost effective, which can potentially use money elsewhere.
If there's specific questions in regards to behavioral health programming, I'm not a program expert. I can definitely answer, high-level discussions in terms of the budget, but we can take those questions and send them over to the Health and Human Services Agency director to make sure that they're being considered. And if you have specific feedback, we certainly can take that in terms of feedback on the budget.
Okay, but thank you so much. And has there been any discussion regarding just the general opportunity for more prevention and early intervention?
There are always discussions in that regard in terms of, trying to work better together in collaboration between the Health and Human Services Agency and the Public Safety Group. And that's one of the things that we see happening, for example, through the focus areas that we have on unincorporated homelessness. This is a partnership where we're definitely working together across business groups to try to focus on that specifically.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
The next member with their hand up is member Harris.
Thank you, Ebony. Can you hear me okay, Ebony?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the great presentation. You were really strong yesterday at the Board of Supervisors meeting as well. And one of the things that I guess I have more of a comment on is in regard to the $5 million that was placed that I actually got referred to the budget and is being heard this month. All this month, Board of Supervisors will make a decision on that $5 million for the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. I have really expressed my concern over a long period of time about this office really having a robust function, having 5 FTEs and having, a well-equipped office to deal with inequity across our county. There's several hot spots that are there, Latinx community and the Black community. Disproportionality is a real issue whenever you're talking about foster care or education or policing, whatever it is. So I guess my concern is that one of the things that I asked for in my proposal for the Office of Equity and Racial Justice was that a consultant would not just come in and help build a mission statement for the office's creation, but a consultant would come in and work with the Human Relations Commission to actually build out the office. So what kind of leadership do we need in there? What kind of positions, and all of those things. Can you answer a question for me, Ebony, in regard to, is there at this point anything within that aspect of the budget for a consultant besides just building a mission statement? And then I guess I'm asking the question because we don't want a consultant to just come in and build a mission statement, but it would be good to have a consultant skilled in national best practices to come in and help build the office. Somebody independent of this commission, but also connected to this commission, and really somebody skilled in this on the national level coming into San Diego with a third eye view. So would that be something that's included at this time? And if not, can that be included through a new motion by the Board of Supervisors?
I'll tell you what's included in the budget, and then I'll let Claudia add on if she has anything to add to that. So in the budget right now, we have appropriations of $5 million that are included currently in the CAO's office that will be transferred to the Office of Equity and Racial Justice through the budget change letter process that's coming up here. And that $5 million, it hasn't been designated in terms of exactly how it will be used. It's pending the structural formation of the office and then ultimately recommendations from that office on how to spend that appropriation. So right now that appropriation hasn't been clearly defined in terms of exactly how it will be spent. But we know that we will need to, of course, address the staff costs associated with it, whatever ultimately is recommended. And I'll defer to Claudia for any other input on that question.
I think that answer explains about the budgeting.
Yeah, Claudia, I would like to ask, or Madam Chair, that we maybe look at the, along with this conversation about the consultant, which I know is coming up, that we look into this aspect, because having a consultant come in to build a mission statement seems a little vague. And I think that if we really want to target inequity across the county, we need to have a robust consultant working with this commission, not just to build mission statements, but to really help build out that office. And we can't depend on, insiders to do that job. It's got to be something that comes from the outside in, inside out strategy, both sides kind of working together to accomplish that. So yeah, I was just concerned about that and was wondering where that specifically, that $5 million is going at this point. So thank you for answering the question, Ebony.
Hey, Shane, this is Andrew Strong. Yeah, I'll just chime in real quick because this is feedback that could absolutely come through the next discussion, and we could take that back as a part of the feedback that we can take back to the CAO as far as the input on this RFP.
This is Daphne Watson. I just had one question for Ebony. Ebony, these are general large amounts of money that cover many programs and services. Is there a place that has the more detailed funded activities of what it is going to actually be funded? Because like in behavioral health, like it was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of prevention, early intervention, treatment services, a variety of things. And it would be helpful to know exactly where the potential funding might be. And then we can have conversations about any particular recommendations that the community might have as to what might be even more useful. So is there a place to go to get that level of detail?
Yes, and thank you for asking that question. There are multiple tools that are available, and I'm really proud that there are some tools that are really user-friendly for members of the public to actually be able to analyze and look at the budget in different ways. As much as I love our 600-page budget document, I do recognize that it can be intimidating and hard to get through in terms of just time, right? So we do have a budget portal that's available that is interactive, that can be drilled on by expenditure or revenue category. You can look at the budget detail by program, and then in conjunction with that, the relevant sections of the budget document that's applicable to the data that you're analyzing is available through that drill down capability. It's available through, you can use it through your phone, you can use it through your computer, but it's a really robust and helpful tool that is accessible directly from the county's main budget page.
And are you seeking comments from the community on the budget, and would they be able to make any recommendations or comments about any particular category?
Absolutely. All feedback on the budget is welcome. That feedback can be provided online. There's no need to call in. You're certainly welcome to call in and participate during the budget hearings, but all feedback that is provided to the county through the online budget comment system, it becomes a matter of public record. That feedback is disseminated to all members of the board, as well as all department heads will see that, as well as all the members of the public. We will make that information available so that everyone sees the feedback and comments that we received on the budget. And that feedback will be published along with what we refer to as our change letter as a part of the budget deliberation supplement, and will be posted online on Friday, the 21st.
And my last question. If the community had some recommendations for things that were not outlined in the budget, but they thought was a need that was needed for the community, could they make a recommendation?
You can give your feedback in terms of your comments. Also, obviously, you have the attention of this group here in terms of a direct line to recommendations to be made through the CAO's office in terms of feedback that you're providing on the budget. So you definitely have multiple venues that you
provide direct feedback. Yes.
Any other questions? Next up, we have members Gina Roberts, followed by Vince Catula, and then Warsan Artan. Member Roberts.
Greetings. Thank you, Ebony Sheldon. That was a wonderful presentation, probably the clearest budget thing I've ever listened to concerning the county. I just wanted to point out to the group and kind of to us, your estimates of trying to replenish your general fund status or your general fund is pretty darn optimistic, assuming that we're going to get $170 million extra in a couple of years. I'm kind of concerned about that. What is the fallback plan for anything to do that? Because you guys don't want to go to jail for not doing what the codes require.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, first of all, there's two sides of this. As I mentioned, we definitely want to be careful in our use of that balance. The $135 million that we have included for the second year of the budget is a worst case scenario. And we will be looking at other strategies to make adjustments to that amount. And what you've talked about and described on the flip side of that is certainly the risk that we have in terms of general purpose revenues, and whether or not the housing market, for example, and assessed values will be sustainable in terms of growth long terms. And that's something certainly that is a risk that we actively look at. We meet regularly, like every 2 months, for example, with our local assessor, recorder, county clerk, to monitor what's happening with the property tax roll in terms of activity here in the local real estate market, to ensure that we in fact are on track to meet those targets, and we make adjustments when necessary to account for that. So this is something that we monitor very closely on a regular basis to ensure that we are on track to meet those targets. And like I said, we will make adjustments as necessary as we move forward.
Thank you. And I just wanted to point that out because people are here talking about trying to add things to the budget, and the riskier, we need to make sure that we're doing prudent changes to a requested budget. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that again. I have to reiterate that this replenishment strategy means that these dollars won't be available for spending on other things. And at this point in our outlook, which is also published in the budget document, we're still anticipating that when we look to the long term, that we will have a budget deficit at this point when it's about $200 million when we get out to 25, 26, as we have to keep an eye towards the future. And so that's something that we're keeping in mind in the context of all of this.
Okay.
Definitely challenges on the horizon.
Member Vince Catula.
Hi, good morning, Ebony. Congratulations on your appointment to DCAO.
Thank you.
As projects begin to come forward before the board, specifically, general plan amendments or tentative maps, whatnot, and additional housing is being built over the next few years, is that surplus of property tax anticipated in future, say, replenishment strategies or future funds that could be allocated?
That's an excellent question. And just to restate it for the group, it's what are our outlooks in terms of long-term changes in property values, and how do we capture that or plan for that? And we definitely do have a long-term outlook in terms of what we anticipate to happen with property taxes and assessed value growth that takes into account what we expect to happen in terms of trends for assessed value growth. We work, like I said, very closely with our assessor's office, who also then in turn, works closely with our permitting departments who see, the front end of that activity. So that is something that we're actively monitoring, and we have in our assessor, we're really proud of them and their analytics that they've come through with us. I'm a very detail-oriented person, and there are a lot of questions that I like to challenge our assessor team on in terms of their analytics, and they, are fantastic in terms of their modeling and what they bring forward for us.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question is the $5 million that's allocated to the Office of Ethics, Equity, is that a one-time only fund, or is that envisioned to be allocated on an annual basis?
At this point, the $5 million that is included in the budget is appropriated based on unassigned fund balance. So it is a one-time appropriation. Obviously, this office will be here for a long time to stay at some level of ongoing resources. The actual staffing levels, as we talked about earlier, haven't been defined. So the ongoing size and scope of the program is not yet clear, and that will become clearer as you all work to define the mission statement, and then the office determines what resources it will need as a result of that. So that's something that we'll look to, and we will build into our planning and modeling as we move forward long term.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Interim Vice Chair Warsan Arton.
Hi, Ebony. Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I have a quick question. I don't know sorry if I missed it, but in the budget, when looking through the CAO's operation plan, in places where it identifies like decrease in staff or like increase in staff, for example, one of the things that I came across was the increase of 9 staff members to the HEART program under the Sheriff's Department.
Yes.
Is there a way to get specifics on that? Like, are those social workers? Are they officers? Is there a place where we can get more specifics on that? And the last thing, because before, I just wanted to like do it in one take. So the last thing that I would add is I know that few people were dropped from the call towards the end of the budget hearings yesterday. So is there a way we can mitigate that tomorrow? Since these are budget hearings meant for the community, maybe like wait a few minutes before we wrap up the budget, like the public comments before we close the comments. So those are my only 2 things. Thank you.
So I'll answer your first question first in regards to the FTE changes. Specifically with those FTE changes, that example that you provided, it's my understanding that those are deputy positions. But we can get specific detail from public safety. It's not included classification detail in the operational plan, because the actual classification of those positions will occur through the Department of Human Resources. So the process is that departments make recommendations on anticipated staffing levels and dollars to go along with that. But ultimately, they need to work with our Department of Human Resources in order to determine what the appropriate classification will be based on the duties that will be defined. So that's a little bit of a process and a little bit of a maybe technical detail for you, but just something that's important to understand. in terms of why we don't publish the detail. It's because the decisions haven't come through yet and been made. But we can certainly provide information on what classes are being proposed by the departments at this time. And so we can get back to you with the detail specifically on public safety if that's the only area that you have a question on. If there are other areas that you have questions on, by all means, please let us know. In regards to the calls for public hearings, I'm not sure what the technical issue was yesterday, but I will definitely personally take that feedback to the clerk of the board to check to see if was a technical issue, and if so, what we can do to mitigate that, because we want to make sure all voices are heard.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Member Ryan Garcia.
Hi, Ms. Shelton. Thank you so much for that presentation. I wish my poli-sci professor had such grace in delivering a presentation like this.
You're flattering me now, and that, I'm very subjective to that. So.
I would have paid a lot more attention in that poli-sci class. But so I have two questions. Going over the budget, we talked about how a lot of the funding for the Health and Human Service Agency is from the state government or from intergovernment sources. With some funding, I think you mentioned roughly $100 million coming from local revenue. Part of the responsibilities of the Health and Human Services Agency is to help students in high-risk conditions, help them with health concerns such as their mental health. How much of the budget from our local funds is going towards those programs, if you know off the top of your head? And also, where would we find information that the county has adapted its plan for schools in the current Zoom era, especially since many schools are online now, especially San Diego Unified. San Diego Unified is completely online. I think Sweetwater is online as well. And many of the communities there are many communities that do not have access to consistent internet or other methods that they would receive those services. If you can shed some light on that.
Okay, so let me just make sure I got the question all right, because I was trying to go through and make note of it. So first question, I think, is general purpose revenue detailed by program and where that's allocated. And we definitely have that information. I didn't understand the second question about schools and Zoom. Can you just restate that for me, please?
So part of the county's responsibilities through the Health and Human Services Agency is to help provide assistance to kids with their mental health. I was wondering if we can find information on how the county is planning to apply those programs during the current Zoom generation when many students don't have consistent access to Wi-Fi or even a device like us.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll have to go back to the Health and Human Services experts to ask that. Unfortunately, I don't know that. I do know enough to be dangerous, but don't know that answer to that question. The general purpose revenue detailed by program is available through the budget portal that I mentioned earlier. You can actually zoom down and drill into that information when you look at the programs by revenue source. It will provide you that information. I have it here in one of my zillions of spreadsheets, but I don't have it readily accessible at this moment.
Thank you so much.
But we can send that back to you, Ryan. Just so you don't.
Thank you.
I think your interest was specifically in behavioral health.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Our next speaker is Chair Nash.
Yes, Ebony, that was a great presentation, and congratulations on your promotion. If you could just go back to the appropriations slide, I have a comment to make. Okay, thank you. So as someone from the outside, myself as a citizen of San Diego, and looking at that particular slide, which to me reflects the overall budget, the county budget, and the areas that it's broken up in, I'm raising a concern that given all of the issues that are going on you know, in San Diego, from, you know, social justice to family strengthening to COVID, what is the thought process that goes into, and you don't actually have to answer today, but I would like to understand what is the thought process in creating this appropriations with these categories and funding opportunities around ensuring that San Diego citizens in the county of San Diego are healthy, whole, that we're strengthening families, that our foster kids are being taken care of. It's kind of related to what Ryan was talking about on a comprehensive at a comprehensive level. And then how are we holding these dollars accountable in terms of outcomes? When you create this budget, what is the mindset that goes into allocating these funds? Because when for instance, when I look at, I'm just gonna be honest, I'm a very direct person, but when I look at public safety, I'm saying to myself, do we have that much crime in San Diego? That's just me talking, all right? And then when we look at health and human services, so where are the positive outcomes? Are foster kids being, you know, returned to their families, for instance? Are the health disparities with regard to COVID being addressed? How do we measure the outcomes in terms of the dollars that we're spending, particularly if you're responding to a taxpayer like myself? How do you measure those dollars in terms of your decisions you make to appropriate the money to those different areas?
Mm-hmm. I'll talk about a couple different aspects that I think are important to share in the context on the budget planning process and also but first I want to talk about the budget document as an accountability document. You know, I talked about it earlier in that it's the document that reflects, you know, policy decisions on where resources are going to be invested. And in that budget document, you know, like I mentioned, it is, you know, a 600-page document, but it's 600 pages because that's what it takes to communicate accountability and outcomes for a $6.4 billion budget. And every department that has, you know, an operating budget, whether it's public safety or a health and human services department, they have an operational plan plan itself that outlines what their specific goals and objectives are, including outlining what their outcome measures were, performance measures that describe what their outcomes were and how they use those resources and what they plan to do going forward. And that also includes, you know, outcomes that weren't favorable. If they did not meet an objective, that's something that has to be described and disclosed. So that's the, you know, where you see that in terms of the actual policy document. But the other part of it that I think that's important to talk about is, you know, you asked what's the thought process and how do we go about, you know, formulating this budget. And, you know, as I mentioned when we started this presentation, it's a very robust process. It's an ongoing process that occurs throughout the year. It doesn't just happen, you know, in June or August when we adopt the budget. You know, I joke with my husband and I tell him all the time that, you know, this job does not stop. It goes around the year in terms of our planning cycle. We're always at some phase of this planning cycle. And that is very true in that there are constantly discussions that are happening amongst the general managers to talk about what is, you know, specifically happening in terms of their operations, what risks are out there, what opportunities do we have in terms of, you know, new opportunities to meet new objectives and provide new services and outcomes to the public. And that may require resource allocation adjustments. And that's the primary reason why we're meeting so frequently and having those conversations is to really gear up and get ready for the budget. So, you know, there are quarterly meetings that happen with the board, as I mentioned, where we provide outcomes on what the budget status is looking like. But even before that, there are monthly meetings that happen between the general managers and their department heads to talk about those specific things on a quarterly basis with the chief administrative officer to talk about those activities. And they all culminate into our annual financial planning activities where we have our 5-year financial forecast, where we're coming to the table together to talk about those specific actions and activities and what it's going to do in terms of influences on the budget. If something's struggling in public safety or even in the Health and Human Services Agency, and we need to redirect out resources, that's where we have those conversations and come through that and try to make recommendations to address those priorities, as well as all of the feedback that we're getting, whether it's priorities of the board, communications from the public in terms of what they're seeing as priorities, are all coming in, being integrated into those discussions that are happening on an ongoing basis.
Okay, okay. And one more question. In regards to public comment, did you say that there is still, I didn't write the timeline, but there is still time and opportunity for public comment? How is that advertised? How does the public know about public comment? How do they know about that?
Yeah, there are a couple different avenues that are, first of all, we're required legally to make sure that we are notifying the public of opportunities on when the budget will be released, as well as ways in which to provide feedback. So legal requirements, as I said, to do that. So we do multitudes of, outlets to try to reach the public, including, traditional print, notifications, if you will. There's various campaigns for social media outreach. There's also other venues that have been used for other specific budget type activities, like communications through ethnic newspapers like the Voice and Viewpoint, for example, or something of that nature for specific budget events. So those are things that we look to as different venues depending upon what the event is. But for public comment specifically on the budget, it's primarily been through print ads as well as through social media outreach.
Okay, okay, okay. So town halls are not, I remember last year, Nathan held budget town halls. That's where I first saw you.
Yes.
And so that's not, those are not in the plans this year, or
is
that something the Human Relations Commission could take on in its role at some point? Town halls, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's feedback that we can definitely take back to the CAO, and to the extent that this group wants to make that recommendation. The approach in terms of the budget community meetings has been to allow each supervisorial district to make a determination on what's best for their district, whether or not to have those meetings. And so that's the approach that we've taken up to this point.
Okay, all right. I know COVID has just kind of interrupted everything, but I was thinking if, pre-COVID or after COVID, if there was some sort of standard practice in regards to town halls for folks.
Yes, it's really up to each supervisorial district as to how they'd like to proceed.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Our next member is Commission Member Harris. Is Commission Member Harris still on the line?
I saw that he left.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to make then an announcement just for our commission members. We have a few that phoned in, just as a reminder that they could hit *9 on their keypad, their phone keypad, to raise their hand. Otherwise, there are no other speakers with raised hands.
Okay. So can we move on to the next agenda item?
Yes, Madam Chair. There are no other hands raised.
All right. Okay. Let's move on then to the next agenda item. I believe it's the RFP discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That will be brought forward by Alan Huntsberger, who will begin the presentation.
Hello, I think I'm, okay, welcome, thank you for that. I'm Alan Huntsberger, I'm the Assistant Director of Purchasing and Contracting for the County of San Diego. And I'm gonna be working with the CAO's office and the staff here in the commission on the procurement of the consultant for the mission statement for and other advisory to the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. On July 14th, we presented to the Commission the process that was going to be used to select that consultant. And we talked about that process and a bit of a discussion on conflict of interest. Those materials were attached to your agenda this week, and we're not going to be going over the details of the process or the COI, but it's there as reference. And if you weren't present for the last time, it's worth a look. And or if you want to review those materials, we can also deal with questions on those. We also talked about the statement of work and the evaluation criteria. We went over those, and at that time it asked for some input for it, and at that time the Commission decided to defer that item and asked us to come back. And so that's what we're doing today, is returning with some to request input on the statement of work, which is basically the description of what we want the consultant to do, and then the evaluation criteria around background and experience, which is the factors that we're going to use to select the best criteria to do this work for the Commission. Before we do that, Claudia was going to talk, I believe, for a minute about the structure of the Commission versus the and the ORJ and the where the consultant would fit in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Director. There were some questions at the last meeting about the relationship between the Human Relations Commission and the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. We wanted to provide 2 brief slides to illustrate that structure. The Commission is an advisory body, and as you can see from these lines, to the Board of Supervisor and to the Chief Administrative Office. Whereas the Office of Equity and Racial Justice is a department or an office within the CAO's office and directly reports to the Chief Administrative Officer. Next slide. And these last 2 bubbles just illustrate the same thing and illustrate the difference that the Human Relations Commission was established by resolution of the Board of Supervisors to be that advisory body. And the Office of Equity and Racial Justice was established as a county department and reports directly to the CAO. Back to you, Assistant Director.
Thank you, Director. Okay. A little lag there. Okay. So for the statement of work, we wanted to talk about the general requirements. These were also briefed at the the July 14th meeting. And I know some of you can see those and some of you may be on the phone and not able to see them. So I'll paraphrase them but not read them. The first one talks about the surveying nationwide best practices and presenting that information to the Commission. Next is to look, when they do so, to look at those for agencies, governments, similar size and demographics of County of San Diego. Also, the consultant will facilitate discussion with the Commission in developing the mission statement for the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. The consultant will provide information regarding equity, inclusion, systemic racism, and racial justice within the San Diego County environment to the Commission. The consultant will meet with the Human Relations Commission and any subcommittees as needed. The consultant will produce the mission statement as developed by the Human Relations Commission. The consultant will advise as requested by the Human Relations Commission. This is the broader context here, which may include implementation or recommendations related to the mission statement and the needs of the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. And the consultant shall facilitate and solicit community input regarding this when and as requested by the Commission. So that, in effect, is the heart of the statement of work, which is what we want the consultant to do for the Commission in regards to the OERJ. The next section we're going to cover is the background and experience, and this is the factors that will be evaluated when selecting the Commission. So the source selection committee that will be formed to evaluate the proposals from the consultants, that'll look at these factors and evaluate each of the potential consultants based on this. First one is demonstrate experience in the field of inclusiveness and diversity training and consulting. Experience working with government entities on these topics of including diversity, systemic racism and racial justice, equity, inclusion, understanding the Ralph M. Brown Act requirements and how to work with a commission such as yours in that fall under the Act, understanding of the issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity, including deep awareness and analysis of systems of oppression, power, privilege, use of research-based strategies to transform work and community environments. Familiarity with research data and studies of diversity, inclusion, and equity regarding or applicable to the San Diego region, and knowledge of and successful implementation of diversity, inclusion, and equity with large-scale diverse groups, teams, and organizations. Communication skills, particularly with diverse populations, and a commitment to social change work. So those factors will be used when the proposals are received. The committee would look at each of the proposals, potential consultants, and evaluate them and how well, how strong they are based on those factors. Oops. Somehow I lost the slide. I apologize for that.
Hit resume slideshow, that should work.
Yeah, there's a real delay on the moving something and actually happening on the screen. Okay. Thanks. Next steps. So pending today's input from the commission, the staff is going to issue the RFP and solicit proposals. The RFP will be open for responses for approximately 3 weeks to allow those proposals to be submitted. And then that schedule will allow for the evaluation and then subsequent notice of award in the fall. And so with that, pending today's input, we still return to the Human Relations Commission to request that 3 members of the commission serve as that source selection on that source selection committee to participate in that evaluation using that criteria. So we're back again, regardless, to get those names. And with that, I'll turn it over for commission input.
Chair Nash?
Yes, yes, sir.
Ma'am would be better, but I would like to move that we accept this proposal to get the RFP out, and I'd also like to volunteer to be on the source selection committee.
Okay. A second?
All right, Chair Nash, before we move forward with that second, I'd like to comment and allow for others to comment on this subject.
Sure.
One of the things that I was very concerned about from the very beginning in my seat on this commission is that we ensured that all communities, or as many communities as possible, were represented. I'm very sad that we're gathering this input, or I don't think it's a good idea that we're gathering this input without the Latino community at the table, as well as various other communities and institutions that would be important to this input. However, I'm understanding the time constraint and the concern about getting this done quickly. I think that it's important. I have a question for our presenter on this item. Would you be able to explain if we could add into this RFP that the consultant, how do we basically make it so where the consultant should have to come from, in my perspective, I think we need an independent party. To have somebody from within San Diego, where there's so many ties to commission members and ties to so many people that would be involved in this process and giving input on this process, I want to really make sure that it's not anyone gets ahead of anyone else, and being able to make sure that this consultant is not basically beholden to anybody, that this consultant is beholden to the interest of the people of San Diego, and that this consultant will collect the information from the full Human Relations Commission and make sure that this mission statement is robust. So to our presenter today, can you explain if it's possible that the consultant, it can be added into the RFP that the consultant is chosen or preferably chosen from outside of the county of San Diego?
I thank you for that question. So part of the factors in the RFP will be a robust discussion of conflict of interest. So similar to what we went over at the last meeting, we'll be putting that out for the consultant to make sure, and we will be vetting them for conflict of interest. Generally, we don't like geographical restrictions. There actually are some federal limitations on putting geographical restrictions in or out on it. But screening that for potential conflicts and independence is part of the process. So it can be covered with there. We can take your input as far as if we should make that very clear that it needs to be independent.
Well, let me ask you, how do you plan to ensure that the process is independent? Maybe that's the better question. How does that accountability look? What is the vetting process of which is there an investigation into the background of someone to ensure that they don't have any relationships with people on the commission or any special interest in this development of this mission statement? How do you plan to ensure that that's done?
We'll ask about those relationships and during the process, and certainly pre-award to vet all of those potential issues, because we do not want to have a consultant either come in with an interest or be constrained by a potential conflict or a perceived one in their activities while they're serving as the consultant.
And that's part of the big deal of the Social Action Committee.
Correct.
Yeah, I would like to second this motion. I would be interested in serving on the source selection committee with Ms. Gina and anyone else. I think that we need to ensure that the consultant coming in is going to be an independent party, well thought out, someone who is skilled in all of these things and is able to work with this commission, not with any special interest, but beholden to the interest of the people of San Diego County. So I'd be willing to second this motion.
Great. Any other comments? Go ahead.
Yes, we have a few hands up.
The consultant, in the slide, it said the consultant should survey nationwide best practices that should include governments of the same size and demographics to San Diego County. I just wanted to raise a concern that smaller or bigger or different regions can also have some great practices that we'd want to consider. I wouldn't want to preclude really innovative and great work from being presented in the survey. Certainly scalability, if it's a smaller region, can we scale it up? Or if it's a bigger region, can we scale it down to be right for San Diego's size and demographics? So I just was concerned that we would only be looking at governments that have the same size and demographics to San Diego. I didn't think that was the right inquiry, and I want to express that and ask if we can amend that and add that will include, the consultant will include an analysis of scalability for any government entity that has different demographics or size to San Diego. Thank you.
And I would add
we can
without question.
Okay, I'll say we can include that in response to that. The way it was written, the first one was broad, that included everybody, government or not, as far as it, and then the second one, it did say includes, which does not preclude anything else. The intent was to make sure that, at least as you mentioned, the scalability portion, at least the larger ones were in there, but we can take that for input as far as clarifying the breadth and of what we're looking for on that. And the scalability is a good word.
We had a few hands up. I'll call them. The order will, in the order that they were seen, is Vice Chair Arton, Member Morones, Member Evans, Member Taylor, and Member Nash. So,
yes, I have a few questions. I know this was already brought up, but is there a way we are kind of, because to me, there's also a value that comes with for somebody who's from the community, being the consultant, right? Like somebody who's familiar with the San Diego region and some of the things that are going on. So what is the evaluation as to like, what are the pros and cons, I guess, for somebody outside of the region being brought in versus prioritizing somebody from the region? Are we kind of examining that? And in addition to that, I know the city of San Diego is also doing the Office of Race and Equity. Is there any communication with them in order to kind of share like best practices as we, you know, as we both, both government institutes kind of start the process of creating these offices?
Hello?
Hello?
Someone responding to Commissioner Warsaw?
Mr. Hunsberger, were you able to hear the question and able to respond?
I was trying to figure out, I would not be able to hear the question. I'm sorry.
Vice Chair Arton, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, 2 quick questions. Let me actually turn this on as well. I have 2 quick questions. Number 1, because I think somebody earlier said that maybe somebody from outside of the region of San Diego is better. That way they're independent. But to me also, somebody from the region who's familiar with our communities, who's familiar with some of the things that are going on within the region, is a better consultant. So I'm wondering, have we examined like the pros and cons of bringing in someone outside the region versus hiring someone, a consultant from San Diego County? My second question is, the city of San Diego is also putting together, starting the process for the Office of Race and Equity. And I'm wondering if there are any correspondence with them to share best practices as we develop these processes. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks. Yeah, so so you had some input that you're feeling on outside better, and in answer to the question about whether it's considered, the way it's written right now, it's not one or the other, but it's very strong on there can't be a conflict, but it could be considered a San Diego or a non-San Diego would be eligible under the current one. It doesn't favor one or the other to the extent that there's no conflict with a San Diego one. And that would be the input that would be considered by the CAO's as far as if that should be done in a different way. And I'm not sure on, Claudia, if you could address the city question.
Certainly with the way the RFP is written and looking at other regions, that would be a natural reach out, would be also to reach out to the city of San Diego to obtain that information and collaboration. And we could certainly mention that too, that when a consultant is brought on board, that to look to our neighbors. Our next speaker, if there are no further questions from our vice chair, are Member Morones. And I know that we are losing people who have to jump onto other meetings. So,
yes, I hope you can hear me. First of all, Mr. Hunsberger, thank you very much for your presentation. I meant to thank you the last one. You do a very good job in presenting. And also thank you for having this meeting on Zoom. I think it was easier for everybody. I agree with the last couple of comments about the fact that the size of where we're looking for the best practices doesn't matter. So in this case, I guess size doesn't matter. And also that we don't also, yeah, thank you. And also that we don't vote on who the 3 representatives will be right now, because so many people have left the call, and I don't think it would be fair to everybody. And that we try to find the best consultant, whether they're from San Diego or not. I think maybe open it up as much as possible. One thing I am very worried about, and even though I enjoyed very much the photo with my friend Shane, got to be careful about politicizing issues on this nonprofit, you know, favoring a particular candidate possibly. We got to be careful about that kind of stuff. And one thing that I wanted to ask is this going to be for one consultant? For how long will the consultant be? And one thing I'm very passionate about, as I'm sure you all are, is the lack of diversity on this commission. I wrote an op-ed a few days ago, but it came up this morning on Times of San Diego about how the Latino community is 35% of this county. The region, we're even bigger, yet we're less than 5% of the representation on this commission. While the Black community, which I love very much and serve a lot, is 5% of the population, yet almost 35% of the representation on this commission. And that's not equitable. So I think we should address that, not right now. And hopefully you'll see the op-ed that I wrote, and maybe Claudia, you could send it to everybody, because a lot of people have been bringing this issue up to me while I've been sharing this to various communities. I'm glad Norma Chavez is on here now from ACLU. And you saw the comments by Mana and Chicano Federation and others. I don't know if everybody's seen those comments, but it's an important issue. So I wanted to comment that. And then the question is, for the consultant, is it one consultant? Is there any reason why it couldn't be two? And for how, or three? And for how long would that consultant serve? Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think there were a couple questions in there that I'll address first, and then Commission can talk about the input you had. So for the time the consultant's on board, the way it was structured, there was no fixed time. It was based on the project of getting the mission statement and doing the consulting that the Commission would like. So that would probably be one of the things that would be flushed out during the proposal process, is to get some ideas from the consultants of what they envision the process to look like and how long it would take. And then, as we know, not focus as much on time as constructive work product and achieving the final objective. And as far as one or more, we can, in a procurement, split an award if we make allowances for it. One thing to be careful of is we have to very clearly define the boundaries of what they are. And then also, as far as resources, of course, bringing more consultants in, you're going to have more overhead and just generalized communication and such on tasks on the consultant. So you could be using up a lot of resources for that. But that would be a decision that could be made by the evaluation committee at the time of when, if that makes sense.
And if I could just hop on that source selection committee aspect, I know a couple of folks, and the maker of the motion and the second also had indicated a interest in serving on the source selection committee. That item is not on the agenda. It will come back to us on a future date. Just to clarify that the motion itself is limited to accepting the recommendations that were made. The expression of interest in serving on the source selection committee is an expression of interest, but that item will be on a future agenda for discussion and selection by the commission.
Thanks, Claudia. That was one of my questions.
Yeah, understood and accepted.
Our next speaker was member Eleanor Evans.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here, and thank you for an excellent presentation. I do have some comments. Number one, I don't think we should be politicizing this commission. So I think it's really inappropriate for the photos that I'm seeing from one of our members, Shane. I really don't think this is the time nor the place. Next, the comment about the makeup of the commission. You know, that's just a classic example of seeing a person based on their color. You know, and I think that's so sad, because the work of this commission is to, quote unquote, see people for their color, but at the same time to be accepting of people of their color. People were chosen because of their sex, their gender identification or gender fluidity, as well as just because a person, quote unquote, is Black. You know, they could be Black Hispanic, they could be Black Asian. So I think that's a very, very myopic-minded statement that the gentleman made. All right. And getting back to the mission statement, somehow, surely, there has to be enough talent within the members to be able for us to be able to write our own mission statement. Why are we spending this money on a consultant? Many of us, and I'll be quite frankly, that's what I do, and that's part of what I do. And I've had a tremendous amount of experience in terms of writing mission statements, race, human relations, situations, facilitator. So I would hope we would really monitor the money we do have. You know, I just don't see why we need to make a nationwide study, and this idea that if we get someone homegrown, they're going to be biased. If we get someone homegrown, they know what the situation is in San Diego County. They have the expertise. And I think part of the job of this commission is for us to write our own mission statement. It's not that hard. Thank you. I'm finished.
Our next speaker is member Kenya Taylor.
Thank you so much. I know we're running out of time here, but I have so many things I want to say, but let me keep it very brief here. To reemphasize what Commissioner Evans just said, we have so much talent on this call here today. We just heard the difficulties with money. I have no idea why we could not be able to create a mission statement on our own. Let's use that money for something else. That's one thing. Also, as far as demographics are concerned, even though this is the Leon L. Williams Commission, it's important that we have Black men on this commission too, and we don't have that. So we need to make sure we have representation, because when you look at who's receiving services, who is on the pamphlets, who is used marketing Black people, it's important that we do not silence Black men in San Diego County. Enough is enough. We need to make sure we're inclusive of all demographics. And I encourage us to make sure that we have opportunities to engage more people, save the money, and utilize our resources for what we need. Also, let me quickly say, on our first call, I had asked what were the best practices for the commission prior to the disbandment. I'm not sure if that information went out to us. I apologize if I overlooked it, but before looking at best practices from other areas, it's essential for us to know what worked in San Diego, what were our strengths, what were our weaknesses, what were our areas of need, because if we reinvent the wheel without looking at the foundation that has been here, I think we'll miss the mark. So thank you for allowing me to share those thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Our next speaker is Chair Nash.
Yeah, we've heard a lot today, and my concern right now is that folks are having to leave the call, and the input that we need to have for supporting the RFP. Do we have a quorum, Claudia, to do it?
We are currently just about at the, we still have a quorum because we have at least 13 members still on.
Okay.
But
okay.
we don't have members to spare.
Okay. All right. So please, no one leave, please, until we can at least attempt to take this vote. In regards to the RFP, I share the sentiments of everyone that has expressed concerns. But let me clarify, the RFP, the consultant is going to write the mission statement for the Office of Racial Justice, right? The Racial and Equity Office? Isn't that the?
Correct.
Yeah,
correct?
The statement of work
Okay.
asks them to write the statement for the Office of Equity and Racial Justice based on the input of the commission. So they're a facilitator.
Okay. So just to clarify, some were, individuals are saying write our own mission statement. Is actually to write the RFP consultant is to write the mission statement for the Department of Racial and Equity that's going to report to the CAO. That's just for clarification on that particular piece. There was also an issue raised about not only writing the mission statement, but also some additional evaluation work. And I thought I saw the language in the RFP where it broadened it, not specifically just to write the mission statement, but also to make recommendations on the structure of the office. Was that there, Alan, as well, if I remember correctly?
Yes, there were two elements of the statement of work that were much broader than the last two. One is to advise and implement recommendations based on the needs of the OERJ, and then to facilitate and solicit community input as requested by the HRC.
Okay, so that broadens the scope of work that had been requested by some of the commissioners, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's a bit of a sweep at the end there to broaden it out.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I just wanted to clarify those particular issues. In regards to recruiting the consultant with 30 plus years of HR experience, our goal is to hire the best qualified person that could operate the work, that would do it in a way where we get the outcomes we're expecting. So I don't have any consternation about it being in-house from San Diego or from outside. I just want to make sure we hire the best person that can do the work, or solicit the services. I'm sorry, solicit the services of the best individual or individuals that can bring back the right information that we need in order to make best decisions. So with that said, are we ready to take the vote?
There is one more hand raised by Member Harris.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
No
I
problem.
think that there's a couple of concerns, and just so that I can be clear, I do see that there were some concerns about my profile photo on Zoom. This is our first time using Zoom, and on Zoom, just like any other social profile, you get to pick a profile picture, and this has been my profile picture for months now on Zoom. So if anyone was concerned that this was a picture propping up politics during this meeting, I do want to apologize, and I do want to say that this is just a profile picture. It is not my position on this commission or my position on the consultant coming in, just so that we can be clear on that, because I heard a couple concerns. Okay, now that that concern is addressed, I do want to be clear that I guess this would be a question for our presenter today. We are having discussions, meaning I'm having discussions with Supervisor Cox's office about maybe there were some concerns brought up at the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday about the fact that maybe the motion, the original motion on this on this added consultant piece, which was not in Supervisor Fletcher's original proposal that came out of my proposal. That's where the consultant idea came from, and it was in that new motion that we're looking at getting some clarification. Supervisor Cox may have not meant a consultant. We know what we have on record. What we have on record is that Supervisor Cox created a new motion that added a consultant to focus on a mission statement. However, what the discussions we are having privately is that there was potentially going to be a correction to that motion from the Chair Cox's office, and a potential new vote on this consultant. I want to ask if that clarification comes forth from Supervisor Cox that he didn't just want a consultant to come in and build a mission statement, which I think is pretty mediocre. Chair Nash, I think that we need to bring in somebody that's going to actually help build this office, and that mission statement can be a part of that. I believe some of our other members raised concerns about, maybe if we had a consultant to come in and do more than just build a mission statement, we would have more credibility on this commission of support toward this measure. So I guess for our presenter today, is that possible? Can I amend that motion to add that piece in as a recommendation, or how can we move forward regarding that to our presenter as far as that aspect is concerned?
Alan?
Maybe Claudia, do you want to handle the
Sure.
procedural part?
So procedurally, currently, what we have is the motion that was before us. So that is what we are moving forward with. If there is a future change that broadens that scope, depending on the timing of that, it could work its way into the statement of work for that RFP, depending on timing. So if there is some further amendment or additional direction from the board, then that would obviously would be taken into account into the RFP.
Okay, well, I'm going to pull my second then. I don't think that we should be passing this today. Number one, we don't have everyone at the table as far as communities broadly represented. Number two, I don't think we should be selecting a consultant to come in and develop just the mission statement. I think it should be a consultant that should come in and help build the office out. And I think that more commissioners would be probably more excited about doing something like that than just having a consultant come in and develop a mission statement. I don't know. That's just a lot of money to be spending to come in and just put a mission statement together. That's like, I don't know. It doesn't sound right. And then thirdly, I think that, having this, consultant, I think some of the points that were raised about the independence and all that, it sounds like the process is clean, but those other two concerns I think are there. And it really concerns me that we're just selecting a consultant to come build a mission statement. I asked that maybe we can wait until the later meeting this month to vote on this when we have more of a consensus from the Board of Supervisors on what they actually wanted to do. And as I've talked to many, the conversation has been, oh yeah, well, why would we? That was the motion, but yeah, we didn't really want a consultant to just build a mission statement. We wanted a consultant to come in and help build the office. So, I don't know what you all want to do, but that would be my recommendation, and I'm pulling my second. I can't vote for this today.
Okay, so Shane, Commissioner Harris has pulled his second. Again, let's go back and first of all, reiterate that I guess the question on the table, is this language in this RFP proposal limited, the scope of work, is it limited just to creating a mission statement? Or as I alluded to in my question, does it also include language that's much broader that meets the criteria of going further than that in terms of scope of work, including helping building out the office? I think the biggest issue on the table is we want to ensure, given this budget crisis that is imminent for the county, that we're not going to waste money on a limited scope of work.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
This is Enrique Morones, and
yes, sir.
A couple of people commented on my comment. I just want to clarify that I stand by my position. It's not equitable with the Latino community, and the numbers that just came up were not accurate. So I would like to have a further discussion about this, maybe at the next meeting. But it's very important that it be equitable to all of us. I don't want to silence anybody. And the other thing, we really should stick to our closing time of 12 noon, because a lot of people have left and we can't vote. So I have to go.
Right.
But I recommend people read the opinion piece before making a comment. And I stand by my history of working with the Black community. So I just want it to be equitable, and I want to thank you. So I really appreciate your leadership, Madam Chair. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that what frustrates me is we created an agenda that was specific to this RFP. And then when the agenda item came up, then we also folded in the composition of the commission. And so we need to stick with the agenda item and also ensure, but I want to ensure fairness at the same time, but we have to stick with the items because now we've lost people. And if we would have limited it to just that agenda item, the conclusions that we were making now is that we not sure that the language includes a broader scope of work. We're not sure that we're going to if it's even worthwhile funding the position, given the talents and skills, particularly if it's limited to just the mission statement. So that was the discussion that we really, really should have addressed when all of the members were here. Even if the outcome is going to be the same, that we will hold on to it and discuss it at our next meeting. It sounds like to me, are we, Claudia, Alan, are we obligated to the board? Is there a timeline that we have to take something back to the board about our position on this RFP? Or can we allow it for further discussion at our next meeting?
So let me just chime in real quick, Ellen. This is Andrew.
Okay.
Just to have a little bit of clarity about as far as the feedback that we're getting from the HRC. So this wasn't the feedback to bring this RFP to the HRC wasn't directed from the board. This was something the CAO wanted to do to make sure we get feedback and input on the RFP and getting the consultant. So there wasn't a time. The time frame is for the CAO to report back on this. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right.
So this was definitely something that we wanted to get feedback on. However, and I do want to chime in on the scope. The scope is broader than just a mission statement. This consultant will be providing us input on nationwide best practices, just like it says, in addition to the 3 HRC members being on the commission, the source selection commission to actually pick the consultant. So I want to make that clear. That's very important. So.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate that. So, okay.
I was also going to say that
Go ahead, Rachel.
Today's item is really to provide input, and so individual members have kind of done that, and the commission could take a vote if it wanted to, but it's not legally required to do so. The feedback will be brought back to the CAO regardless of whether there's a motion in a second and the item is voted on. So we may look like we may start, once we drop below a quorum, then we will have to adjourn the meeting. And so if this has to adjourn without any action item taken, it's okay, because all of this feedback will be brought back to the CAO.
Okay.
So Chair, this is Member Harris. So Andrew, you're saying that you really don't need our blessing. You just basically, it's still going to happen either way. The consultant's still going to be selected. The consultant will still do this. The Board of Supervisors can bring the clarifications forth, but you're basically saying you don't need our blessing. You're going to do it anyway.
Well, I'm not saying I'm going to do it anyway. What we're saying is we're bringing this feedback back to the CAO to make that determination. So all this feedback is going to come back to the CAO to make a determination on what should go in that RFP, in addition to whatever clarification comes from the Board of Supervisors around the scope, based on what you're saying as far as the private conversations that you're having. So all that feedback is going to come back to the CAO. We'll make a determination to move forward.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Great.
Madam Chair, we've lost a quorum. We have 12 members.
Okay. Well, we need to adjourn this meeting then.
I move to adjourn and postpone everything.
I second.
I second the motion.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your patience, and I apologize for our going over time. And we will definitely have much more heavy hand on our next meeting to ensure that all of us can remain on the call by noon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.